Hey guys, I'm Cecily Jr. here, aka Mustached, and welcome to my review of Bad Times at the El Royale. So I heard a bit about this movie, just a smidge. I had fairly recently had seen another hotel movie that I should have had reviewed earlier, but gotta keep moving forward, so I'm gonna go ahead and review this one. Anyways, it starts with a man entering a hotel, uh, shifting his way around with this bag and gun. He gets comfortable moving stuff around, and he decides to hide an item in the floorboard. And once he does, this other man comes in and shoots him down from the outside. So it cuts to this woman, the one on the top right of the poster. I'm gonna give each of these characters because it almost feels like um, it's so characterized in this movie that everyone almost has a like nickname that I kind of gave them in my mental head, even though I caught some of their names in the movie. So I'll call this lady the singer for purposes of making the review easier, and she talks to the priest, who I'll simply call the priest, even though later on in the movie certain things definitely do happen. His real name I did catch was Flynn, but for purposes again I'll just call him the priest. So the person in charge is this younger gentleman named Miles, and he shows them that there are two separate sides of this hotel. There is one that is Nevada based, and there's one that is California based, and there's a clear red line dividing the two little suite areas, I guess I'll call them, and each one has different perks, and one of them is more expensive, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, as he goes on explaining, uh, he shows them a little bit more of like what is around essentially, and they start claiming certain rooms. I did catch the singer's name. Her name is Dorlene, I believe. I believe that's how it's pronounced. So, but as they are conversating, a third or fourth character enters into the scene, and is another lady, the one on the left on the poster there, who writes her signature simply as "fuck you." So that is her. That will be her code name throughout the review. I actually didn't remember if she said her name or not, or I didn't remember catching it until way later on. I might have not even wrote it. So, fuck you, it is for her. So much for that YouTube monetization. Not that that's even relevant for someone like me who's under 1,000 subscribers anyway. So, fuck it. Anyways, so again, they're claiming rooms, and we get this sort of doctor, cop specialist, and I'll call him the cop. So the cop essentially starts taking out like these phone lines. He's like searching for them, and he takes most of them out except with the exception of two, I believe. Meanwhile, he's like talking to his daughter or something, and then helping her fall asleep or something along those lines. So so he makes his way outside and goes into the main lobby to grab a key. Meanwhile, we see a murder is being reported on the news, even though I don't know what relevancy it has to the rest of the movie. It kind of like focuses in on this, like the camera pans to the newscast, so I'm still not sure what relevancy that had to the rest of this movie, but whatever. Anyway, so he makes his way into this locked room, and he makes his way into essentially is a one-way window look into like what everyone else is doing sort of area, and he sort of watches on as the priest is like cutting down his room to look for something, and then he starts to hear the singer sing, Darlene sing, uh, and then it cuts after he leaves. It cuts back in time to get more like acquainted with this singer character and her producer giving her some hard times, and then like trying to like do that whole mentality of like, oh, I may be suggesting if you sleep with me, you'll get in good with the business, and then I assume like that's where the dialogue seemed to be leaning towards, but she was like, whatever. So, anyways, it cuts back to the present, and then she talks to the priest some more, and he like gets to the he like rings the bell, and then they sort of wait, and then share a little meal together, and then they talk about they talk to each other pretty briefly. Asks about why she sings, and then she goes on about it, and then he talks about his memory loss. Uh, So after she gets up to change the track, he decides to put something in her drink. Uh, so there's that going on now. So the cop is told to uh, find all the remaining surveillance things and then take them out. But he had already seen. I forgot to mention this in the third room or the next room where he sees fuck you. He sees her take in then this other girl who we later learn is Rose, who I'll just call Rose. So and she's all tied up, so he assumes that the situation's getting pretty bad. So he's like trying to do the right thing. So it cuts to this beach area. And I assume this was a flashback of a man who you probably would immediately recognize as Chris Hemsworth. His character, Mr. Shirtless, I'll call him Shirtless Man, because he doesn't usually wear a shirt. So, Shirtless Man approaches Boots. That's the code name he gives to her, and I'm referring to Rose, by the way, so that's her nickname, I suppose. And Boots happens to be the one who is currently tied up by Rose. Sorry, not by Rose, by Fuck You. So, the cop decides to, from the outside, approach Fuck You and knock on her door and try to make his way in. He's trying to actively be the hero. So he breaks his way in, and Fuck You shoots him down dead. And through the looking window, she hears a noise, and also conveniently, the host was on the other side, as well as the priest. They were both on that peeking side, and the host got shot for it. So he then I believe it cuts back to the host talking to the priest previously, and then he's like starts showing him the windows, and then he like does his little confession about like what he was doing, and then like it shows from their point of view, seeing the girl tied up and then him getting shot. So it is a little bit like back and forth, and the timeline is a little hard to gather at times, but it does require like some sort of thinking, like, oh, okay, so now we're here and we're going backwards. It does do a lot of that throughout the film, so just be wary of that. Meanwhile, the priest gets this little film, and apparently this is a very important thing, an item that has very important images on it. So he holds on to that for the time being. Meanwhile, it cuts back because we had seen previously that after the singer hit the priest, that she had fled and we had no idea where she was going. So it cuts back in time again to see her flee the room and work her way outside, seeing the timeline of when the cop was making his way inside before he got shot, and getting to a car where she does eventually see it after making a phone call. She's trying to get away, trying to start the car, but the priest gets to her and tells her the truth about why he was trying to drug her, and it was all to get into her room with this bag of money, and wants to cut her in on this prize of the money that he looted. And then it shows a flashback of him used to working with these other rookies, and then it cuts to him being in court, so he had gotten caught and been placed in prison, where that memory loss mainly took place. So, he wants her help to get the money now. So, she actually agrees to this. Meanwhile, Rose and Fuck You, or Boots and Fuck You, have the host tied up. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna die and stuff. And, yes, I actually did find out her name really late on. Her Fuck You, her real name was Emily, but for the fun of it, I'll continue to use her nickname that she uses in the movie, so, hey, don't blame me. Blame the movie. No, I'm just joking. Rose or Boots introduces the two of them to the host. So now things are a little bit more personal. So anyways, it cuts back to the singer when she was still in, as she is now currently in her room. She takes off her long hair like it's a wig. And she's singing while Fuck You is looking at her through the one-way window, and meanwhile, on the corner inside where Fuck You cannot see, the priest is looking under the floorboard to uncover the treasure or bag. They are very carefully timing it to whenever the singer claps, the priest will remove one of the floorboards or something along those lines, or nail out the floorboard. So this manages to work, and eventually she decides to leave, figuring that there's nothing, that this lady's not really doing anything crazy or anything, so she decides to leave. Anyway, Rose makes these little fires in the main room, like in these little contained areas, I'll call them. And while she is alone with the host. He's like begging not to get killed. And meanwhile, Fuck You is wondering where the priest is specifically and asking Miles for that information. However, he has no idea. So, as the priest and singer make their way out of the room, they immediately get grabbed by these two henchmen as Shirtless makes his way inside of the hotel. He had been called by Rose pretty previously, and now he was making good on that call. So, Boots is all up on that. She, even though younger, is totally enamored by Mr. Shirtless. And it shows a flashback of them wandering through with his little crew and through the forest, or not a forest, but like a grass field, I should say. And then it shows them getting into these little fights, these little scraps, where he picks Boots and this other random girl to fight each other. And then before they can really get into it, he breaks them up. So, for their transactions, Mr. Shirtless ties everyone up with the exception of Boots. And fuck you, the host, the priest, and the singer are all now tied up in this little table where it's where Shirtless takes the helm of the situation, takes out the money, takes out the tape, and is trying to gather all the information required. So, Boots gets exposed for killing somebody. It's a pretty short cutscene, so I'm not really sure what that was implying. Like, who did she kill? Maybe it was just some random person. I'm not really sure, but anyways, so Shirtless gets on Miles' case about him trying to repent, and decides to make between him and uh, yeah, sorry, fuck you, choose between the color of red and black as the spins the roulette table, or the little device. Uh, so it lands on black, so he ends up shooting Rose, or fuck you, I should say, sorry, I wrote the wrong name there at that point. Anyway, he tells the host that the priest isn't a priest. He was able to put that together by himself, by the way. And gets the priest to tell him about where he got the money from, and the singer tries to cover for them, but he gets the truth anyways. So the lights eventually flicker out, and the priest kicks his way out and a fight breaks out between him and Shirtless. So as a scuffle between all the other henchmen are happening, Miles and the singer end up on the floor temporarily, and the singer's like, she's like trapped somewhere as this gunfire is going off, and she's asking Miles for his help, and he actually admits to killing people in the past, and she requires to know how many, and he admits to killing 123 people, showing in a flashback that he was a total war machine. So, getting this flashback stuff going on with the host, he gets his eyes all in a haze, and then he goes off in a shooter rage and kills Shirtless in the process, as well as some of the other henchmen inside, with his crazy dead accuracy, and works his way outside. So, he eventually gets up to Rose, an actual Rose, or Boots in this case, but in the process of trying to help her out, she stabs him to death. And for this transaction, the priest ends up shooting Boots, and she ends up dying too. So in the host's final moments, he has the priest, who actually isn't a priest, pretend to be a priest to play his role and to get forgiveness before he dies. So the priest and the singer collect the money as the area they were in, because of all the infighting, the fires that Boots had set off the fires are now spreading, so they make haste in getting out as they make their way with the money. It cuts to a casino where the singer gets to sing and the priest watches on their little performance, and that was Bad Times at the El Royale. It was a pretty interesting movie. I do think that the cuts from back and forth were a little disorienting from time to time, but again, just giving it a few moments to get into, like, okay, so this is what's happening now. I do think that because of the cutting of the back and forth, some characters do suffer more than others, particularly shirtless or Mr. Hemsworth here, because the main cutscenes he gets are between him walking in the field, and then all of a sudden in the present, he's all of a sudden has this like super organized group, and I do believe from point A of them walking through that field and battling to being extremely organized in the present, it does feel like there is a piece missing in between those two things in that sort of scenario. Just small other hiccups, as I mentioned along the way in the review as well, or the recap as well. It is good, but it does have some minor little bits that it could have helped out. Just like filling in those smaller details, I think would have went a really long way. I don't mind it cutting back and forth as much, as long as, again, it makes sense as to, like, okay, so that person left, so they had that time to do something else. Things like that. You have to be really careful when you're dealing with cutting back to different people in different timelines. So I do think that this movie did handle that okay. Again, some characters definitely suffer more than others in that regard. Again, primarily Hemsworth, because he does come in pretty late in the movie, so I think that was going to happen regardless. Yeah, and the characterization, is pretty good. The first surprise that happened to me, because I thought the cop was gonna end up being like the main character, because for the first, like, I want to say good quarter of the half and even the middle of the movie, we're following him primarily. Um, so it was a pretty interesting twist to alter, like, expectations of who we are following, who's going to survive this night. Uh, these elements that I do think actually do make the movie stronger for it. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. I do think that those smaller elements together, both put together, kind of could have made for a tighter movie. But overall, everything else was handled well enough. So that is my review at Bad Times at the Royale. And if you enjoyed my review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out that link in the description and head you over to my Patreon page, and any donations are greatly appreciated. Until next time, everyone, bye-bye.